Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2025, the gentlewoman from Virginia, Ms. McClellan, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous material on the subject of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is with great honor that I rise today on the first weekday of Black History Month to anchor the Congressional Black Caucus's commemoration of Black History Month. 2026 marks a century of public commemorations of Black history, which began in 1926, founded by historian Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. It was originally conceived as a week-long celebration called Negro History Week, expanded to the full month of February by President Ford in 1976. Why February? To coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. In his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, Woodson wrote, "Those who have no record of what their forebears have accomplished lose the inspiration which comes from teaching of biography in history." Said another way, if you don't know where you come from and you don't know where you've been, you don't fully understand who and where you are, and you don't know where you're going. I grew up a student of history. My father would be 101 years old this year. He grew up under the tyranny of Jim Crow in Tennessee and in Alabama. My mother grew up under the tyranny of Jim Crow in Mississippi. I grew up listening to the stories of what their life was like when they saw the best of government through the New Deal in the midst of the Depression, and they saw the worst of government in Jim Crow. They told stories, particularly on my father's side, of his father and his grandfather. We didn't know who his great-grandfather was because whatever plantation he was born on in Montevallo, Alabama, they didn't think him worthy enough to record his name or his birthday. But we were fortunate enough to know who the first James Fenimore McClellan was, also born in Montevallo. But because he died when my grandfather was 10 years old, we know very little about him. What we do know about him, we got from family lore. But my step-great-grandfather wrote a book called Inching Along. And it is through that book that I fully came to understand my family's history, which was Black history, which was American history. How my great-grandfather had to take a literacy test and find 3 white men to vouch for his character to be able to register to vote after Reconstruction ended. How my father and my grandfather had to pay poll taxes, despite the 15th Amendment saying all of them could vote, just to be able to register to vote. How my mother, my grandmothers, my great-grandmothers didn't get to vote until after the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The horror that I felt watching the murder of George Floyd on the internet in 2020 was the same horror that my parents felt watching the aftermath of the murder of Emmett Till. Because history may not repeat itself, but it rhymes. And through my family's history, through the study of American history, I've recognized a pattern. I was born and raised in Virginia, the birthplace of American democracy, in July of 1619, when the first representative legislature in the Western Hemisphere met in Jamestown. And a month later, Virginia became the birthplace of American slavery, when a ship of men and women who were stolen from their home in Angola were then stolen again from pirates, were brought to the shores at Point Comfort and sold, traded for supplies. A few short years later, maybe a little over 100, a Virginian penned the words that we will celebrate this July. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and he meant men, were created, endowed by their Creator with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He didn't mean all men. He didn't mean the men who were enslaved at his plantation. But the idea of the founding of this country has been one that African Americans have strove to make true for everyone. And every time we have made progress in making those ideals a reality, there's been a backlash. And that backlash involves three things: violence, propaganda, and voter suppression. My great-grandparents saw the first backlash. My grandparents and my parents saw the second backlash. My generation is living through the third. And yet, we have a president that doesn't want us to talk about the bad parts of our history, but they inspire me. This past spring, when I took my children to the African American History Museum, not for the first time, and I stood in the exhibit on the Middle Passage, which I'd been in many times before. It's a heavy exhibit. It's an ugly part of our history. But I felt hope, because that time I realized that somebody survived that hell so that I could be here in this body, in this fight, a fight they never could have imagined. And while I fight the same fights as my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents, and whoever survived that voyage, I do so from a position of strength and power they never imagined. And I fight those fights so that my children and my grandchildren don't have to. And I am proud to be in this fight as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And we will fight the erasure of our history, and we will celebrate it every single day. And with that, I would like to yield to our chair, the Honorable Yvette Clarke of New York.
Good evening. I'm Representative Yvette Clarke, Chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and proudly representing New York's 9th Congressional District. I'd like to thank my colleague, Congresswoman Jenniffer McClellan, for anchoring this Congressional Black Caucus Special Order Hour. Mr. Speaker, I rise today with my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Black History Month and to reflect on the innumerable contributions to our country that Black Americans have made throughout our nation's history. During Black History Month, we celebrate the generations of Black Americans whose courage, advocacy, sacrifice, and patriotism have moved our nation and the world forward. From the American Revolutionary War to Reconstruction, the Great Migration, to the success of Black Wall Street, to the Jazz Age and the Harlem Renaissance, to the Civil Rights Movement and beyond, there's no time in history that Black people have not contributed to the vitality and success of our country. As chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, I'm proud that as our caucus has grown from 13 visionary members in 1971 to a historic 62 members in 2026, we have continued fighting to dismantle barriers, create opportunities, and protect the rights of our communities. Throughout our nation's history, the CBC has been called to confront countless threats to our communities. Time and again, we have answered the call and stood in the breach on behalf of our communities and the values that make our nation strong. Today, under the shadow of the Trump administration, we are being called to yet another unprecedented and consequential time in the history of our country that we must address head-on. The past year of President Trump's path of destruction has targeted our communities relentlessly. From purging the federal government of Black leaders and Black workers, to removing the presence of Black stories and accomplishments from education and historical landmarks across the country, to launching volatile and violent campaigns against Black immigrants, the message from the administration to Black Americans has never been clearer. And at any moment, the Supreme Court could strike down Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, putting our most basic and fundamental rights on the chopping block. These threats have put Black America once again in a perilous position, but we're not powerless, and we will fight back. On the shoulders of our founders, we will continue to push back against efforts to impede our progress, erase our history, and cut off access to opportunities in our communities. We understand that the anti-DEI movement means anti-Black. This month and every month, we will continue to make clear that the contributions of Black Americans will not ever be erased, undermined, or undone. We will continue fighting for access to the ballot, fair representation, and our fundamental freedoms, which are under threat each and every day. Our history, Black history, is American history. With that, I yield back to the gentlelady from Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I now yield to the gentleman from Georgia's 4th District, Representative Hank Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Madam McClellan from the great state of Virginia, 1619, where the first settlers came to America, and then same place where in that same year the first slave ship arrived on this continent. And I was privileged to be among those in Congress who traveled to Ghana in 2019 to celebrate or to commemorate the 400-year anniversary of the slave trade. It was a great visit. And history is so important, and Carter G. Woodson knew the importance of history. He knew that if a culture does not tell its own story, that story won't get told. And if you don't have a story, if you don't know what your parents did and what your grandparents and your foreparents did, if you don't know the accomplishments, and of course, many accomplishments of Black people, if you don't know them, then you suffer a psychological disability, a collective psychological disability as a people. And so it's very important that we know our history, because when we do, we understand the great accomplishments of our forefathers and our foremothers. And we can be proud that despite the conditions under which they lived for 250 years in this country, slavery, and then another 90 years of Jim Crow, when we consider all of our accomplishments during that time, we can be proud. Now, many people don't know what our accomplishments are or have been, and that's their ignorance. You should read up on it. That's what Black History Week was originally proposed to do. That's why it was instituted, was to take a week for people to understand what our history was. And our history was not just slavery. Our history, as I said before, was accomplishments and struggle and overcoming and achievements. And so when Carter G. Woodson established Negro History Week back in 1926, February 7th, he established that week that also commemorated the births of two important individuals in Black history, Frederick Douglass, who was born on February the 14th, 1818, and Abraham Lincoln, who was born on February 12th, 1809. During those times, Black people were held as slaves, and but we've made so much progress since then. That's why we're so proud of Barack Obama, who was elected not once but twice to be president of this United States of America. And it wasn't easy for him, and it has not been easy. It was not easy for Carter G. Woodson, who was the second Black to attain a doctorate degree from Harvard University, the first being W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a man of great accomplishment, a historian, an author, a journalist, and it was in the 1970s. It was 1970 when folks at Kent State University in Ohio declared that we would, instead of celebrating Negro history for 1 week in February, we would do it for the entire month of February. And it was Gerald Ford, President Gerald Ford, who during the nation's centennial in 1776 issued a proclamation, White House proclamation, acknowledging the month of February as Black History Month. And so we have been celebrating this month. It's ironic that at Kent State University, there was a lady who was killed by National Guardsmen protesting the Vietnam War. Let's go to today, where instead of having Ku Klux Klansmen riding around the cities and the towns and the countryside wearing hoods, we now have people wearing masks, and they're shooting people in our streets. They are known as ICE, and we got to get rid of them because we've got a guy in office that's trying to turn the clock back on history. If you don't know history, you are bound to repeat it. And we know history, that's why we're not going back. And so, Madam Chair, with those words, I will take my seat. And I thank you for anchoring this hour for the Congressional Black Caucus under the leadership of the great Congresswoman from New York, Yvette Clarke. And I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Johnson. I now yield to the representative from Maryland's 7th District, Congressman Kwesi Mfume.
I want to thank the gentlewoman from Virginia for yielding, but for also helping to sponsor this very, very important special order on the fact that this is Black History Month technically, but Black history ought to be something of what we do and part of our lives every day, because as much as there is American history, you can't have that without the history of African Americans in this country. I want to also, at least to the members who've come before this body this evening, who have talked about the great contributors to that history, have talked about why it is so very, very important, have talked about what it means, not only to black people, but what it should mean to the world when you look at a race of people who have suffered, endured, and survived 2 centuries of slavery, oppression, deprivation, degradation, denial, and disprivilege. You know, in 1848, in a speech delivered in Edwardsville, Illinois, Abraham Lincoln addressed these words to his countrymen, and I quote, he said, "When you have succeeded in dehumanizing the Negro, when you have put it down and made it but for him to be but as the beast of the field, when you have extinguished his soul in this world and placed him where the ray of hope is blown out, as in the darkness of the damned, are you quite sure that the demon you have roused will not turn and rend you?" What constitutes, Lincoln asks, the bulwark of our freedom and of our independence as a young nation? He said, it's not our crown embattlements, our bristling seacoast, our armies, or our navy. These are not our reliance against tyranny, he said, for all those may be turned against us without having made us weaker for the struggle. Our reliance, he said, is in the love of liberty which God has planted deep within the hearts of all of us. Our reliance, he said, is in the spirit of freedom, which prides itself as a heritage of all men in all lands everywhere. And then he admonished, he said, destroy that spirit, and you would have planted the seeds of despotism at your own doorstep. Ignore the chains of bondage like so many of the black and brown members of our nation, and you one day will prepare your own limbs to wear them. Accustomed, he said, to trample on the rights of others, and you would have lost the creative genius of your own independence, and as such, would become the fit subjects of the first cunning tyrant who rises among you. Lincoln's words, uttered almost 180 years ago, have gone unheeded. And such a cunning tyrant has, in fact, risen among us. The efforts of this administration to turn back the hands of time, to deny equal justice and equal treatment, to pretend that we are living in a world that sees nothing, knows nothing, hears nothing, and does nothing, is to pretend that we are all asleep. So we desperately need, in this era of smaller visions, those of us who are black, brown, white, yellow, and any other color or race, an ability to come together in coalitions, the way we have always done to make a real and lasting difference. We use this occasion on Black History Month to remind us that we so desperately need those who will stand up for that which is right and to speak out for that which is wrong. And it is, for me at least, a daunting task to find people in this country who are prepared to do the right thing day in and day out, because we are increasingly seeing the ranks of others who want to do something different and follow this administration go in the wrong direction day in and day out. So I hope that we use as many days during this month that we can to commemorate, to celebrate, to highlight, and to hold forth the history and the struggle of African Americans in this country, and I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you.
I now yield to the representative from South Carolina's 6th District, Congressman Clyburn.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding me the time, and I apologize for not getting here at the time I told you I would. But a few other things that came into play. I also want to thank Congressman Mfume for restating that Lincoln speech. a speech that I think bodes well for us to reflect on today in much the same way as I reflected last week on some history. As I watched things unfold, I thought about that often stated mantra that Black history is really America's history. And it is. And it came very forcefully to me the last 2 weeks. I watched things happening in St. Paul and Minneapolis, and I thought about Selma and Montgomery. And when I saw what I consider to be the murder of Alex Pretter, I thought about Jimmy Lee Jackson. Now, I may be the only one on this floor old enough to remember Jimmy Lee Jackson and what led to his death and what his death precipitated. The fact of the matter is, the reason I thought about him was because Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot, murdered by law enforcement when he was trying to protect his mother. His mother. And I saw Alex Pretter trying to protect a woman and being murdered. It told me why I was thinking about Selma and Montgomery as I watched things happen in St. Paul and Minneapolis. We ought to learn lessons from history. And as George Santayana, that great Spanish philosopher, said to us, if we fail to learn the lessons of history, we're bound to repeat them. So the question we have to ask ourselves as we celebrate Black History Month, have we learned any lessons from Selma and Montgomery? Or are we comfortable allowing ourselves to repeat them? I've been listening to a lot coming from this administration about Black history. Well, I don't understand why we don't see where this country would be today if we did not have the contributions of people like Ernest Everett Just, who was recognized around the world as the Apollo of science. Yet, this administration seems to think that there's something wrong with celebrating this genius, his contributions to not just this country, but the world. I don't know why it's a problem for us to focus on where we would be in medicine were it not for Charles Drew, who gave to this country the genius that allowed us to be able to refrigerate, to store blood, to use it when we need it. Do we realize how many souls, lives were saved in World War II because of this man's genius? And it's supposed to be an insult to little children to learn about his contributions? Why is it okay for my grandchildren to learn about the genius of Thomas Edison and his principal invention, the light bulb, but it would be insulting for a little white child to learn about Lewis Latimer and that filament that Mr. Edison used to put in his light bulb. The filament that keeps the light bulb burning was invented by a guy named Lewis Latimer, the son of former slaves. a genius. And the reason we're able to do that today is because Thomas Edison had enough maturity to step outside of his comfort zone and sit down with Lewis Latimer and get his filament and put it in to the light bulb. Thomas Edison had that much maturity to know that as smart as he was, as big a greater genius as he was, he did not know everything. And he didn't have a problem leaning on the genius of this black guy to allow his invention to work. We live a much better life today in this country because two guys, one black and one white, have lit the world. What's wrong with that? How is that insulting for us to have in our textbooks? Yet this administration seems to believe that. Why is it okay for Jackie Robinson to be an outstanding baseball player? But when we put in the archives of the Army his contributions as a military man, we take it out. This administration ordered that Jackie Robinson stuff be taken out of the archives. What is that about? That seems to me to show the ultimate in immaturity. If you're so threatened by your own existence that you don't want anybody else to be recognized for theirs. That's what Black History Month is all about. And this is one of the anniversaries. Carter G. Woodson had the genius back in 1915, 1916. We finally got around to it, Black History Week. I'm old enough to remember Black History Week. And I'm not being partisan here because I want to say tonight, I want to thank President Gerald Ford, who celebrated the 200th anniversary of this country by calling upon the nation to give due respect, moving Black History Week to an entire month. That was Gerald Ford that did that. So there's nothing partisan about this. I thank Gerald Ford for having the maturity to do that. And so I want us to think about this month because we're getting ready to celebrate the 250th anniversary of this country's existence. Are we going to have a 250th birthday of this great country while not giving due honor and respect to people who helped to make this country great? This country is greater because of Charles Drew. Where would be, when I saw that tear gas there in Minneapolis, I thought about Garrett A. Morgan. It was Garrett A. Morgan who invented the gas mask, as well as the traffic light that all of us just, where would this country be today but for the order that this man's invention gave to us? And I can go through a whole lot of this, but I know my colleagues are waiting to speak, and I apologize for going so long, but I hope that we will meet like this for the rest of this month so I can continue to give due honor and respect to a great American, Gerald Ford, for giving us a month to celebrate the contributions of people of color. Now, yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Clyburn. I now yield to the Congresswoman from Alabama's 7th District, Representative Terry Sewell.
Mr. Speaker, I rise with my Congressional Black Caucus colleagues in celebration of Black History Month 2026, a time to recognize the extraordinary contributions that African Americans have made to the history and culture of America. Black History Month is an opportunity to acknowledge the inventors, artists, change makers, and everyday citizens who built this nation and who continue to shape our shared destiny. As the representative of Alabama's Civil Rights District, I stand on the shoulders of visionary leaders who risked everything for a vision and a dream bigger than themselves. Leaders like Rosa Parks, our former colleague, the Honorable John Lewis, Dr. King, Amelia Boynton Robinson, and so many others. As a daughter of Selma, I know that their sacrifices brought us the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, daring this nation to live up to its highest ideals of equality and justice for all. Sadly, we live in a time when Black history and Black Americans are under attack. Old battles have indeed become new again. Throughout the past year, our communities have been at the center of the chaos and destruction that this president and his administration has visited upon the American people. President Trump has tried to whitewash our history. He has cut our health care while giving tax breaks to billionaires. He has canceled Black History Month celebrations at the White House and has targeted Black immigrants with racist smears. And he has waged an all-out assault on the right to vote. Just this week, the Trump administration arrested 2 Black journalists who were simply doing their jobs. And right now, President Trump's cronies are fighting in the Supreme Court to undo what remains of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Their actions threaten to take us back to a time before the Civil Rights Movement, a time when Black Americans were second-class citizens and discrimination was the law of the land. In my home state of Alabama, Trump's attacks on Black Americans are on full display. Last year, his executive order led to the removal of the brave Tuskegee Airmen from the Air Force training manual. Just 2 months later, his administration tried to sell off the site of the Freedom Rides Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. And while both of these decisions were eventually reversed, it was only because our community, the African American community, spoke up and refused to be silent. Mr. Speaker, these tactics are not new. They are borrowed from the same tired playbook that has been used for centuries to silence our voices and dilute our power. In these troubling times, we should take a lesson from the foot soldiers of the Civil Rights Movement. Shortly before his passing, Congressman John Lewis gave us a marching order. He was frail, riddled with cancer, but he went back on that bridge one last time, and he told us to never give up, to never give in, to keep the faith and to keep our eyes on the prize. So my friends, my fellow Congressional Black Caucus colleagues, we can be tired, we can be frustrated, we can be downright mad, but what we cannot do is give up. We need to use our voices and call out injustice wherever it hides. We need to demand better from our elected officials. We must vote like we've never voted before. I want to thank my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus for hosting this special hour, and I want to thank my colleague from Virginia for her tireless leadership in this effort. This Black History Month must be more than just a celebration. It must be a call to action. Generations of Americans, past and present and future, are counting on us to meet this moment with the urgency it demands. We must do so in the name of our foremothers and our forefathers. We must do so in the name of the future leaders of this nation. We must do so because it is always right to do what is right. Thank you, and I yield back.
I now yield to the Congresswoman from Illinois' 2nd District, Representative Robin Kelly.
Mr. Speaker, and our two hosts, Congresswoman Jenniffer McClellan and Congressman, who am I thinking? Anyway, I rise today to join the Congressional Black Caucus in celebrating Black History Month and honoring the Divine Nine, the historically Black fraternities and sororities that have fostered generations of bold leaders. For more than 100 years, the brothers and sisters of the Divine Nine have played a vital role in driving forward American history. The Divine Nine has produced hundreds and hundreds of Black leaders who have shaped our country, including Dr. Martin Luther King, Jesse Owens, Vice President Kamala Harris, Langston Hughes, Shirley Chisholm, John Lewis, and Barbara Lee, and many, many, many of my colleagues in the CBC, and including leader Hakeem Jeffries. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the Divine Nine organizations: Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, Delta Sigma Theta, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority, Iota Phi Theta Fraternity, and my very own Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority. Alpha Phi Alpha, Kappa Alpha Psi, and Sigma Gamma Rho were founded at majority white colleges to create community for Black women and men. All of our organizations give us the tools to advocate for ourselves and our communities. The Divine Nine as a whole has helped and is helping to make our nation a better place for all Americans. At every turning point in our country's history, the Divine Nine was there. We fought for women's suffrage, Jim Crow, voting rights, civil rights. We continue to be at the forefront of medical advancements and digital innovation. Our music, art, literature, sports are woven throughout this country's culture. And we are still here fighting against this Trump administration's attack against us. This president is trying to erase our history, rescind our rights, reverse the clock to a time when Black people were not seen as equals. He is blatantly racist, and his administration is against DEI. You cannot erase our history because Black history is American history. Black leaders are American leaders, and Black rights are human rights. The Divine Nine will be here, as we always are, fighting against oppression and the advancement of Black people. I yield back.
And now I yield to our former chair, the gentleman from Nevada's 4th District, Congressman Stephen Horsford.
I thank the gentlelady from the Commonwealth of Virginia for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mark the beginning of Black History Month and to honor more than 100 years of Black history in America. Today, I speak with urgency about American history, specifically to highlight the fact that American history is Black history. From the march from Selma to Montgomery, where Americans demanded the right to vote, to the student sit-ins at lunch counters where young people risked their safety to challenge segregation, to the courtrooms and classrooms where Black Americans pushed this nation closer to its promise of equality. Every major expansion of democracy in this country has been shaped by Black courage, Black leadership, and Black sacrifice. And yet, Mr. Speaker, we must ask ourselves a simple but urgent question. Why are there forces trying to erase this past? Erasing history does not solve the problems that we face today. It does not create equality. It does not put us on a level playing field. And it does not move this country forward. Black History Month exists for a reason. In 1926, historian Carter G. Woodson created Negro History Week to ensure that Black history was taught seriously in our schools and fully recognized as American history. His goal was never limitation, it was expansion, to broaden the nation's consciousness and to deepen our understanding of who we are. What began as 1 week grew into Black History Month, not to isolate Black history, but to correct centuries of exclusion. Black history is not a side note, it is a foundation. It belongs in our schools, in our books, in our public institutions, including the National Museum of African American History and Culture right here in DC. And in my home state of Nevada, Black communities have helped build our labor movement, our neighborhoods, and our culture. From the historic west side of Las Vegas, where I grew up, to communities all across our state. History is not something to erase. It is something to face. So we do not repeat the same mistakes again and again and again. And instead, we continue to work towards a better future that includes all of us. That is why we celebrate Black History Month. And that is why I'm honored to join my colleagues of the Congressional Black Caucus, who, as the conscience of the Congress, will always hold this institution accountable to living out the full promise of our nation. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
I now yield to the Congresswoman from Ohio, Shontel Brown.
Happy Black History Month, everyone. Thank you, Rep. McClellan, for the recognition, and thank you to the Congressional Black Caucus for organizing this special order hour to recognize Black History Month. Black History Month will always matter, but it's especially important during a time when our ancestors' contributions to this country are being erased and denied. But Black History Month has never just been about the past. It's about the present and the future. So I must ask, what has Trump done for Black Americans besides put a target on our backs? Besides moving the goalposts for success, because this White House has erased our history, undermined our opportunities, and taken direct steps to make Black families poorer than those Black families were a year ago. And in this speech, I won't focus on the reckless rhetoric we've heard from the president, because his actions speak even louder than his words. Actions such as executive orders, actions such as budget cuts, and actions such as the passage of bad bills like Trump's big, ugly law. So it begs the question, what can Black Americans expect from this White House? Because under this Trump administration, millions of Black Americans unable to afford health care. Millions of Black families going hungry because of cuts to nutrition benefits. Opportunities for wealth building, be it home ownership to entrepreneurship, have been cut off. And Black and brown neighborhoods terrorized by lawless ICE agents. All while our right to vote, our right to assemble, our right to go to school and work free from discrimination are being trampled on brazenly and blatantly with no apologies or regrets. Trump took those resources and protections away under the guise that the plight Black Americans face no longer exists. Claiming that the playing field has been fully and completely leveled and our opportunities across the board for Americans, Black, white, men, and women are now equal. There's no more discrimination. There's no more disparities. There are no inequities to address. And as a Black woman, dare I say, he is wrong. Because what this administration does not understand is that we've been here before, and we persevered. Where discrimination created pitfalls, we worked alongside our neighbors to close the gap, and we kept fighting for justice. And we didn't just hold the line, we pushed back and created civil rights protections that made sure the law favored the people, not the powerful. Mr. Speaker, that is Black history. So despite the cuts, the chaos, the cruelty, and the corruption of this administration, like every past challenge, this too we shall overcome. Because Americans everywhere are aware of the harm this administration is causing. We know that our freedoms are shackled and chained to the rights of others. An attack on the freedoms of one American is an attack on all of us. So, we will not be deterred from this fight for our rights. We will not go quietly into the night. We will stand our ground. We will make our voices heard, and Black Americans will emerge from these dark days stronger than before, just as we always have. And with that, I yield back.
I now yield to Congressman Jonathan Jackson of Illinois.
Thank you, Honorable Congresswoman. In the interest of time for my colleagues, I'd like to say a very special thank you for holding this special order hour. I'm Congressman Jonathan Jackson from Illinois' 1st Congressional District, where African American History Month was first created by then Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Dr. Carter G. Woodson comes from West Virginia. He was a coal miner's son by way of Ohio. He went to the first integrated college in the United States of America in Berea, Kentucky. There were great abolitionists fighting for a noble cause. They saw African Americans as full human beings. He had the idea, once he saw that there was no African Americans written in his curriculum, that something was missing. He went on to ask a professor, a teacher one time, why are there no African Americans written and our history is not chronicled? And the person quoted and says, your history of your people is not important. That echoes to this very day as we see so much of what's going on in this administration. Dr. Carter G. Woodson left from Berea College, the first integrated college in the United States of America in Berea, Kentucky, founded by an abolitionist Caucasian, a white man, who also has the history of Cassius Clay, one of the great congressmen that served in this United States body, which has the family ancestry of Muhammad Ali Cassius Clay. And you can see his statue just outside of this wall as well, part of the Clay family that is immortalized in this institution. From there, he went on to the University of Chicago, where he took that challenge and made it into a thesis. And he wanted to show blacks and whites making progress together. So he put it in February strategically to honor both Abraham Lincoln's work and Frederick Douglass, showing black and whites making progress together. He did not want to isolate African Americans in history. He made it deliberate to show people of goodwill making work together. So I ask you, if we do not demonstrate and show this, how will people know that there were great abolitionists that always recognized that people were human beings? We only show one side of history. So to erase African Americans out of history makes Caucasians less heroic in history as well. So I applaud the work of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. From there, after leaving University of Chicago, he went to Harvard, where he became the second African American to get a PhD in history. It went from Negro History Week, as Mr. Clyburn had said, to African History Month. By Gerald Ford, it was black and whites making progress together. And now what are we seeing right now? Under the disastrous leadership of the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Pete Hegseth, he is trying to remove the history of then Mr. Jackie Robinson. You just can't talk about his phenomenal work in baseball. He challenged the color line. He broke the color barrier. When you take Harriet Tubman off of the $20 bill, you're talking about a military strategist that broke the backbone of the Confederacy by being able to navigate people under the Underground Railroad. When you remove good people from history, this is a problem for all of our children. So in the interest of time, I will be back this month repeatedly, and I hope my other colleagues will open their eyes so they can learn, so their children can see the happier and the better side of American history. They can see racial progress. Right now, we're living in a time where people are trying to erase history. You cannot erase history. You must confront it, learn the truth about yourself. It will keep America strong. It will make America better. That is our goal. That is our desire. I yield back, Congresswoman.
Thank you. I now, as one Black history maker, yield to another, the first Black member of Congress from Oregon, Ms. Janelle Bynum.
Thank you to Representative McClellan for hosting us this evening. And Mr. Speaker, thank you for being here as well. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I stand here as the first, but not the last, Black member of Congress in Oregon's history. And I rise today to celebrate Black History Month. See, it's not lost on me that I am just one generation removed from segregation. And it's not lost on me how recently this moment, standing before you as a Congresswoman, would have seemed impossible. My mother was valedictorian of a segregated high school in Conway, South Carolina. She had the brilliance and drive to do anything she dreamed, but America didn't believe in her future. But she made sure that I had the opportunity to write a different story. And as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, I am reminded that I am not in this fight alone. We are a community of leaders united in our goal to shape a more just, a more inclusive, and a brighter future for this nation. Our country needs it now more than ever. We are seeing attacks on our communities and on our values by this administration. Mr. Speaker, humbly, I ask that we must continue to rise together, not only during Black History Month, but every day. I yield back.
I now yield to the Congressman from Maryland, Glenn Ivey.
I thank my colleague from Virginia, and I want to thank the Congressional Black Caucus for putting this together and coming forth with this information and giving me a chance to speak as well. I'll be brief. I know we're running out of time, but I did want to comment briefly about Minnesota. I just got back a little while ago from Minnesota. We went out to do a special hearing out there, in large part due to the killings that have gone on, to the ICE protests, to the arrests, the roving patrols and the like. We wanted to see it firsthand, and I gotta say I was shocked by what I saw, but that's not the first time I've seen it, because African American history had a lot of parallels to what's going on in Minnesota right now. And I think it's deeply disturbing, deeply troubling, the deaths that have been caused, in my view, by police excessive force, ICE agents using excessive force, the roving patrols and the like, the racial profiling that's taken place, all of those kinds of things we've seen before. And I think we also have to be sure we understand a couple of things moving forward. One is that the agents who work for ICE, they're not warriors, they're guardians. Whether they put on the camouflage or they're wearing masks, no matter, they work for the American people. And they're guided by the Constitution, or should be guided by the Constitution. And we have to make sure that they understand that fully, just as the protesters in Selma and Birmingham had to make sure that that lesson got across to the law enforcement in Alabama and in those cities at that time. I think it's critical for us, as Congressman Jackson pointed out, to make sure we recall that the advances that have been made during the African American movements and efforts have been not just African Americans, they've been Americans across the spectrum working together, fighting for justice, striving together to make a difference. So I want to make sure we continue to do that. I'll come back and we can discuss this more at length in the future. But it's critical for us to find a way to move together forward, because we can't do it alone. And with that, I yield back.
I want to close with words of Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history, with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I rise. A lot of our history wasn't written down, was erased, our files burned, our bodies twisted, hung, shot, trod in the dirt, and still we rose. The Congressional Black Caucus, founded by 13 members, now 62 strong, we will continue to ensure that our stories, that Black history, is told. Still we rise, because Black history is American history. And with that, I yield back.